Good afternoon, everyone. The International Parking and Mobility Institute presents today's Learning Lab, Directed Enforcement, the Future of Efficiency and Smart Management, presented by SpotGenius. My name is Kenny, Senior Training and Certification Specialist here at IPMI, and we thank you for joining us today. As a reminder, today's presentation is being recorded. We will make the recording available online and will post it to IPMI's YouTube channel within a few days. Before we start, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping rules for today. This Learning Lab will last 60 minutes with a Q&A session at the end. If you have questions for today's speakers, please feel free to queue up a question at any time by typing it into the Q&A and press send. To ask a question, click the Q&A icon in the Zoom menu. A window will open. Please type your question and hit enter. We will get to as many questions as time allows. It is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Shabir Karimi, CEO, SpotGenius. Shabir is a serial entrepreneur with more than 20 years of business experience. He is the founder of 4 successful technology companies, from product creation through company acquisition. He led Panapoda, now part of Fortinet, a leader in cybersecurity. He holds a BS in computer science, e-commerce technology from DePaul University. And now I'm going to turn the audience over to our presenter, Shabir. The audience is all yours.
Thank you, Kenny. Really appreciate it. Hello, everyone. As stated, my name is Shabir Karimi. I'm the CEO of SpotGenius. Born, raised, and based here in the windy city of Chicago. And it truly is very windy today, getting cold for those that are kind of in the same region. For those that don't know, SpotGenius, quick kind of plug there, is an AI-powered parking intelligence platform, which uses computer vision to automate occupancy tracking, automate compliance checking, enforcement, and provide parking guidance as well. So directed enforcement is definitely a big focus for our own product. We get a lot of attention on that. We talk to customers quite a bit about how this can change your operational procedures. So very, very excited to talk about this topic today, get into some of the details about how it can be done. And I'm very much looking to learn a little more about what kind of questions and topics you guys are thinking about as well. So just from an agenda standpoint, we'll spend about 25 or 30 minutes or so walking through some of these topics. We're going to start with really reviewing what are the different types of enforcement approaches that have traditionally been used today. What are the nuances with some of them? Then we'll get into defining what directed enforcement is. What are the different components of it? How does it work? We'll get then into some of the overall benefits and kind of efficiency improvements that you can expect that it'll help drive. We'll start to field some questions there as well. And so like Kenny mentioned, please start queuing those up in the Q&A panel. I've got Rachel Wheeler here from our team as well. She might choose to answer some of those in the chat. Otherwise, we'll kind of see how much time we have to let here at the end and sweep some of those up. So with that, let's get started. Before I get into this, I actually want to launch a poll. So we've got a couple of polls along the way. And the first one here is, I want to hear from the audience a little bit, because I know we have a mix of different folks from universities, from cities, some operators, things like that. What kind of compliance issues are you currently facing when you kind of look at your your overall challenges? Payment compliance, permit compliance, is it more about turnover? Do you have a lot of illegal parking scenarios where people are parking in spaces that they shouldn't, tying up towing zones or no parking zones, or just outside the lines, things like that, or all of the above? So just want to get a feel for, all of you have showed up today because you have some challenges with enforcement. So I just want to see what the source of kind of some of your major pains are. So give you guys a few seconds here to fill this out. Kenny, I'll let you decide kind of when you see a good amount of responses coming through here.
They are still coming in. Active audience today, but I will end it right here. About 70% of people answered. Thank you, guys.
Okay. Pretty good. All right. So for a lot of you guys, all of the above. Otherwise, payment compliance, illegal parking is bigger than I thought, actually. So that's important to see as well. And I hear all of the above. It makes sense, because I think when you look at a lot of our parking assets that are out there, they tend to be mixed use, right? So you've got different audiences coming in. Some of them are transient parkers that are paying via scan to pay or pay stations. Some of them are monthly parkers, so they have permits. If you're a university, you tend to have lots of different kinds of permits for those audiences. And so when you've got these mixed environments, and all of these tend to be problems. So thanks for that insight. I'll try to keep that in mind as I'm presenting some of these topics as well. So many different methods of enforcement, kind of shown up on the screen here, that have traditionally been used. And It's usually based on kind of a few different factors. What type of compliance needs do you have? We just asked about that. Is it more about payments, permits, reservations? Is it more free parking with time controls? Your budget's certainly going to drive your decision around which methods you use. What kind of staffing and resourcing you have is going to certainly dictate it. And what kind of access to technology do you have as well? Some of these are lower tech or no tech, and some of these are higher tech. So, starting to crawl through these upper left-hand corner, coming down, we'll snake around. If you look at tire chalking, it's the age-old approach of how enforcement's being done. We got folks usually walking around marking cars with the long, chalk sticks. Nowadays, there's digital forms of this, but we still see some of the chalk sticks out there. And this is mostly used for time-based parking scenarios, obviously, when you've got vehicles that need to move after a certain amount of time, and this is the city, for example, or any kind of organization trying to cause some sort of turnover to happen. So we create a perception, we create more parking for other visitors coming in. So not necessarily paid scenarios, but more so just for turnover. Highly manual, obviously, limited. It's going to be limited by the number of officers you have and how often they can patrol. I mean, one of the limiting factors here is the first time you see it is when the timer really starts, right? So that in itself is going to kind of limit the effectiveness of it. So it doesn't really scale very well. And it doesn't obviously work with other types of compliance that are not just time-based. Kind of move on to the next one, boots in the ground, very, very common approach. It's the natural progression from the first one here. It's where you've got your officers walking around, usually on foot, on street, on lot, and so forth. Usually have some sort of digital device, handheld or an iPad and things like that, where they're going to enter license plates either by keying it in or by scanning a license plate. And that technology device is usually going to look up across different backends, whether it's a authorized permit list, whether it's payments, reservations, things like that. And because you've got that tech, this approach will, is going to handle the additional compliance needs. Still, there's some efficiency there, but still pretty manual, hard to scale. It's going to be limited by how often you can get around, how many officers do you have, how much ground they're covering. And there's likely a lot of violations happening in between the time that they're able to see those vehicles because they're just limited, right? We hear from a lot of agencies and organizations that, every 3 or 4 hours is when their enforcement officers are getting around. So obviously there's definitely a lot of compliance violations happening in between those two time frames. Moving on to the next one, time patrols. Kind of very similar to the first two, but this is more, we still hear about this where there's a fixed time rather than a continuous patrol. There's a fixed time where maybe enforcement officers coming in a vehicle to check that lot. Suffers from a lot of the same problems in terms of violations happening in between, and especially when you think about word does travel fast across cities and institutions that, hey, they check this lot 3 or 4 times a day. It's kind of slotted this way. People are going to abuse it. Mobile LPR is, really the next progression of making this more efficient. This is when vehicles are equipped with an LPR system, as you can kind of see in the picture there. Usually on all ends of the vehicle, you're driving around on street, off street, and ultimately it's doing the same thing, checking against the various backends, looking for authorized parking. This definitely drives a lot more efficiency because there's more automation in the mix. And you can cover more ground in a vehicle, obviously. But what we hear from some of our customers who are implementing this kind of approach, there's still some challenges. You've got the fact that it's very expensive. I mean, the price of the vehicle itself is expensive. Equipping it with the LPR technology can be expensive. The maintenance and the overhead which goes with the vehicle, similar. That those are all kind of costs. It does drive some efficiency, but it comes at a cost. There's some other kind of deficiencies with this, especially when you have lots where, you're in a state or a city where, front plate is not required. For example, you have vehicles backing into spots and, as a LPR vehicle is driving through the lane, obviously you can't see behind. So that's a miss, and that requires the officer to get out or just skip over it. So kind of the efficacy there is a little bit compromised. And what we've heard from some customers as well is that ultimately you have to kind of drive on a specific route, a guided route that the system's programmed for, because it needs to understand the orientation of the lot, the rules of the lot, and so forth. So that can be a little bit limiting as well. So overall, definitely it can be effective, but it has some nuances that everyone should be aware around it. Not really a competing approach, but more of a parallel topic, which is enforcement by mail, which is obviously getting a lot of attention these days as well. This is obviously a great option, and you can kind of incorporate this into any approach you use. Because it obviously it follows the driver home in the mail, on the postal mail, and you don't have to have a captive vehicle that you're necessarily putting on the windshield for or not. You do need to make sure that you've got good proof, good evidence that's irrefutable, and not everyone can obviously do this approach. Obviously, based on your local ordinances, what kind of institution you are, and so forth. So it's just going to be something that certain people can leverage versus others. So that's just kind of setting the background for the different types of traditional enforcement approaches that are out there that we hear from many of our partners and prospects, and some of the nuances of them. But let's get into the topic which we're all here really to talk about, which is directable enforcement. And directable enforcement is really a hybrid approach of meshing some of those other concepts together into a unified approach. It's leveraging fixed base cameras. So in the last slide, you talked about mobile LPR being one of the approaches that has cameras involved in it. Those are obviously moving around with the vehicle. This is a fixed camera in different positions. Oftentimes, these are going to be pointing at the ingress, egress points of a lot, garage, and so forth. And in some cases, also looking at stalls. And it's usually coupled with some sort of smart parking management system that's going to automate the checking. So the checking that we were talking about, those enforcement officers doing on the ground as they patrol through the lot, using whatever backend, whatever technology, the system's going to do it in an automated fashion. So this is going to eliminate the need to do the patrolling. So if you think about where your time gets spent and where the kind of maximum inefficiency is, it's really the detection of the violation, because you're spending so much time patrolling around. And in most cases, most of these drivers, most of these vehicles are in compliance, looking for the needle in the haystack, which is really the vehicle out of compliance. And what this allows you to do is now retarget your resources from doing that very manual, ineffective job of patrolling to now just reacting to violators that are actually, in the lots, on the street, or in the garage, taking some sort of action, which is going to be determined by you. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this later in the presentation. So the system's really serving as an intelligent router, directing enforcement staff to the exact location of where the violation is, with all the details of that violation pre-captured, pre-discovered, pre-loaded, and really making the process very, very efficient. And again, we're going to look at some examples of this. The other really big benefit of this, if you remember the last slide, we talked about the nuances of a manual approach is, ultimately the timer starts. The first time you see it is when you can kind of gather your first piece of evidence and proof. The big benefit here is that this is real time, literally real time. It's tracking to the second of when the vehicle enters and exits, and you're not giving it any free time unless you want to, of course. So, last point I'll make here is really what's in the headline, which is, we've heard from countless parking departments and teams that they want a balanced approach. They want a still the human touch. So they want automation. They want a lot of heavy automation doing the labor heavy part of this job, but they still want a human touch and have human discretion on what to do in the end, because there's a lot of nuance about why you may take a certain action over the other. That discretion may vary based on your, the compliance history of that vehicle and that driver, how often they have violated. It may have to do with who they are specifically. I mean, if you're in a institution, if it's staff versus the main administrators versus students, that might change how you take an action. Where are they violating? Is this a high profile area versus kind of more of an auxiliary space? And what's your overall enforcement policy, culture, philosophy, around that as well? So that human touch, that human discretion is a really, really important factor, and where we want to reserve most of our time being spent when we're talking about doing enforcement with automation. So let's look at the different types of directed enforcement you can implement. There's two different types, or two different types of granularity, if I could call it that. There's a zone-based approach, and there's a stall or a spot-based approach. The zone-based approach, which is showing on the left-hand side of this slide, you're still getting that automated checking against the various backends. Vehicle pulls into a zone, and it's checking those things in real time as a vehicle pulls in. It does not require patrolling. But it does assume that every stall in that zone is the same. That every section in that zone is treated the same way. There's no special rules because it's kind of a black box, right? It's just a zone. Now you can carve out as many zones as you want within a lot or a garage. You know, if you've got different sections of a surface lot, or if you have different floors of a garage, and if you want different treatment around each one of those zones, you can definitely still achieve that. But you need to equip it with more cameras typically. When you have a violation occur that's tracked by the system's going to direct that violation to an officer into the zone. So depending on how large that zone is, the enforcement staff will need to seek out and find the vehicle that's in violation. Of course, it'll have license plate number, it'll have a vehicle make, model, color, and other characteristics like that to look for, but they will have to seek it out. So still a lot of value in this approach. Compare that to the spot-based directable enforcement approach. This is when you have tracking down to the stall, and down to the stall tracking has a lot of other benefits outside of enforcement when it comes to occupancy, wayfinding, things like that as well. But this really allows you to do a couple of different things. One is it allows you to have down to the stall level specific compliance logic. So if you've got a few VIP spots kind of in the front part of that lot, you've got ADA spots, you've got maybe EV charging spots that you want to have different rules around because you want to make sure there's an EV vehicle parked in there. You want to make sure it's plugged into the charger. You want to make sure it doesn't overstay beyond 20-minute charging time limits and things like that. Maybe you have different permitted spots that are just sprinkled throughout different lanes and things like that. So if you have this kind of need, then you kind of need to almost go to a spot-based approach instead because you need that specific logic down to the stall. The other benefit this is going to have is your directed enforcement. So when the violation does occur and it sends this violation to the enforcement officer, it's going to direct them to the specific stall number. So they're no longer having to circle around, drive around, walk around. Even though they have make, model, color, and license plate, they know exactly where to go. They take the action and they walk away. Now, this is going to be very beneficial when you have large lots because finding a vehicle in a several hundred stall or 1,000 stall lot can take a while. If you've got a single officer covering many lots, this is going to drive a lot more efficiency. And so we see when there's bigger scale, more focus on efficiency and getting more out of our enforcement team, this tends to be the approach that we see people use. Now, what do you need to really implement a directed enforcement solution like this? We're going to walk through a couple different components. The first thing that you need is to have cameras, right? So you'll need cameras. Now, depending on the system you're using to orchestrate this whole process, your entire enforcement process, that'll dictate what kind of cameras. Some solutions out there, they have their own proprietary cameras. You buy it from the vendor. They're kind of manufactured by them. There might be some specific things that's sitting on the hardware versus other systems that use off-the-shelf security cameras from the hundreds of vendors that are out there, 3 of which I just mentioned here at the bottom of the slide. Axis is a very common brand, for example, Sony, Hikvision, and so forth. I'm not here to comment on which approach is better than others. I'm obviously very biased towards off-the-shelf because that's what we do, but I mean, to each their own. But point is, depending on the system you pick, you will that'll dictate to some degree what cameras you need. Now, some important considerations for the camera technology you're going to pick. If you're doing ingress egress tracking, this is kind of where you need typically better cameras because we're reading license plates on those ingress egress points, and vehicles are kind of operating at a certain speed. There's sharp angles in the mix. There's other environmental dynamics like lighting, low light, high glare, things like that that are in there. So the optics of the camera for this are going to be really, really important. And again, rely on your vendor of choice, whoever you're choosing to implement this system, to kind of make that recommendation. But that's what's going to drive the cost factor depending on your environment dynamics here. If you're doing overhead tracking, because you want to do stall level tracking as well, some considerations here are going to be more around the height. How many spaces can you cover with a single camera? So usually has to do with more the field of view, how high it is off the ground. Are there obstructions? Do you have wide angle lenses so you can get more out of one enclosure, one out of multiple sensors? What kind of angle or skew is being encountered depending on the orientation of the lot from the camera? Are they parallel or perpendicular and so forth? Infrastructure is obviously going to be a big component of this as well. So what kind of power availability do you have? Is there power at all? Is it 220? Is it 110? Does it need to be transformed down? Do you have power over Ethernet you can use? Is there internet accessible? Is there Wi-Fi accessible? All these things are going to be important factors that are going to drive your kind of hardware strategy. I'm going to launch another poll here. I'm just kind of curious. How many of you are currently using a camera-based enforcement approach of some sort? Doesn't have to be directable enforcement, but just any kind of camera-based approach, whether it be mobile LPR, fixed-based cameras at a ingress egress points. Maybe you're using another service that kind of fully allows you to outsource this, and they handle all of your citations process, things like that, or maybe just kind of counting technologies as well. I'm just kind of curious. Okay, pretty high, 70% or more saying yes, with another 12% currently evaluating it. So that means you guys are pretty well versed in this already. Don't need to spend too much time here. That's great. Let's move on to the next thing you're going to need. And not that you're going to need to get new ones, but you need to kind of get a handle around the various backends you're using to collect payment or track payment, to authorize parkers for your assets. And so most of you, I'm sure, already have a multitude of these kinds of solutions, that these types of products and backends you're already using: scan to pay systems, mobile app based payment systems, reservation platforms for pay before you arrive, pay on foot stations, monthly parker databases, guest passes, things like that. So increase as you need to, or rationalize it as you need to, but just getting wrapping your head around what you have, making sure that they do have good integration ability and interoperability ability. And most of them do. The good news is, and we've got pretty good hands-on experience with this, that most of the players out there have open APIs. They allow you to tie these into different systems. So you should be good to go. So it's just about understanding what you have, what its interoperability is, because whatever system you choose to orchestrate all this needs to connect into these and be able to check across all of them when different events are happening. The next thing you'll need to kind of implement directable enforcement is whatever citation management system or enforcement system is that you want to be able to use. You may already have one. And again, I forgot to mention this in the last slide. This is by no means a preferred list or a exhaustive list. These are just a few that kind of come up there. And so many of you, if you're doing enforcement already, probably have a solution like this, which is ultimately tracking the life cycle of a citation from issuance all the way through to escalation and collections, right? And so there's a back office component of these, and then there's usually a handheld solution that your enforcement officers are using. And sometimes those handheld solutions are either some kind of custom device, or it's just an Android or an Apple mobile device that is ultimately running some sort of app on it, which allows you to print the citation via Bluetooth or something to like a Zebra printer that they have around their shoulder. So choose a system, either existing or new, which can integrate with these systems. Integrations is just really, really important. I think the whole parking world is kind of moving towards more of an ecosystem approach where things work together, data flows freely. Because if you do pick a system that can do that, you have all your details preloaded into the handheld when you're getting sent a violation, which really is a huge efficiency booster because it's preloading all the data and preventing any kind of data entry. Not preventing, but eliminating some data entry. This is one example of kind of what this can look like right now. This is just an example of a solution called Data Ticket that is pretty heavily used in the West Coast, specifically by municipalities and cities. System detects a violation, sends it to Data Ticket. Data Ticket sends an alert saying, hey, there's a new violation somewhere. And as you can see, all the information about the lot, the zone, the first scan, the last scan, all the make, model, color details, things like that are preloaded in the handheld. So really what the enforcement officer is doing is going there, verifying with their eyes, augmenting with any additional data that may be needed, hitting print and getting out of there. So we talked about the different components. There's the cameras, There's all of your payment, permit, reservation backends. There's the enforcement solution. These are all the kind of the edges of it, and then you need a system that's going to kind of help orchestrate, bring it all together. And the key thing is they're bringing together the solutions that work for you, because I think what we've learned is that every agency, every organization has different needs. There's certain platforms that are really deeply embedded into your organization already. Displacing those is really, really hard. So it's better if we can work with what's kind of there. That's usually the best of breed approach. And this is just one example of how we illustrate this in the SpotGenius world. But again, this is just an example. So you see kind of the various inputs on the left-hand side, where there's inputs coming in from cameras. Those cameras can be ingress or egress cameras. It can be overhead cameras. You've got inputs coming in from different payment platforms, like we talked about before, the kiosk-based solutions, the mobile app-based solutions, the reservation platforms. You've got your permit databases and so forth, all coming in so that data is commingling itself in the same orchestration system, which then can cross-reference things and make smart decisions for you. And what comes out of that, specifically when we're talking about this topic, which is directed enforcement, the two things you really need are dynamic compliance and directed enforcement. So dynamic compliance really being a rules engine that allows you to check across multiple payment, permit backends, things like that, but also manage different rules that may change throughout the day based on, what lot you're in, different scenarios, events, things like that. And so having a rules engine that can deal with that, but then having the directed enforcement solution as well that can really streamline how you're doing this with the integrations to your handheld. And in our scenario with SpotGenius, because we have that tracking, we can also, from that, derive out really advanced occupancy details and data and analytics and insights around how your assets are being used, along with parking guidance as well. But this is just one approach. Other systems may orchestrate a little bit differently, and that's perfectly fine. So when you can shift your process to a real-time directed enforcement type of operation, your enforcement officers are now moving towards a monitor and react kind of model. So again, rather than patrolling, walking around, they're from a central kind of location, monitoring what's happening and deciding where to go based on where their highest impact can be felt. So different tools are going to enable this in different ways, but just kind of one example here up on the screen, which is more of a heat map style kind of display, where you can see the different parking assets, where there are violations happening and the number of violations, and really about getting the highest ROI by getting maximum value out of their time cycles and just making it very, very scalable. So another poll opportunity here. I'm kind of curious from the group, how many enforcement officers do you have working at maybe your peak times? Because obviously the topic we have today is going to talk about how we can increase their efficiency, get more out of them. Just kind of curious.
About 5 more seconds, and I'll share the results.
Okay. Kind of what I expected, which was right in the middle there. That's usually the sweet spot. About just over 50% had 4 to 8 officers, which is significant when you think about it, right? In terms of the investment you're having to make there. So how do we get more out of them? And typically, I've never heard of a single agency, organization, university, city that said, I have enough. Everyone's always stretched thin. They can't reach where they want to get to. And so driving more efficiency is a very, very important kind of thing that's top of mind for them. So with the increased efficiency, with the data flowing between systems and your enforcement staff having the ability to make more thoughtful decisions, how severe of it? Now this allows them to really take a more progressive approach, that human touch we talked about before is around the discretion, I should say, the discretion around what kind of action do you want to take, and looking at all the data points the system is ultimately arming you with. So, how severe of an action you want to take, that might depend on how long the violation has been happening for. Do you want to give the driver the benefit of the doubt because it's a short running violation, or is it a very clear abuse happening, and you kind of want to take it to the next level. How critical is this parking area that they're violating in? If it's your prime space, prime area, you may want to take a different kind of action. Are they a first-time offender, or are they a repeat offender? And if they're a repeat offender, how often have they been repeating? So, that's where having the data flowing through these different systems, having a good way of arming the enforcement officer, with the alerting, with the handheld around kind of that history, all those data points, is going to allow them to take more of a progressive approach and just ultimately deliver a better experience for everyone. Another important thing here is really around whenever you're implementing any kind of technology in a new product, it's really important, it's really critical to make sure you can measure success. So make sure you're picking a system that values the impact that data can make. It values reporting and makes the data very accessible and easy for you to see how the investment you're making is actually driving the results you want. So, as you go on, make sure you can track things like, how's your overall compliance rate just as a whole? How's that changing as you go? What about the number of total violations happening during different time frames of the day and the week? You should be able to see how that shakes out accordingly. How long are the violations occurring for? Are they short? Are they long? Are we getting less repeat offenders over time because our enforcement is becoming more effective? So those that are actually offending know that they shouldn't offend again because they're going to get caught. That's certainly something you should be looking for. How many violations are we citing before the vehicle leaves? Because if it's a captive vehicle, your ability to kind of take some sort of action is obviously, increased. So how many vehicles are leaving before we get there, and how quickly are my enforcement officers citing after the violation is detected? So if it detects the violation at 2:33 p.m. Central Time, how long until the enforcement officer got there? Because ultimately, with taking this approach, they should be able to spend more time now just reacting to the violations versus doing that patrolling. So these are the kinds of metrics that you want to be able to track in your system, get it back, and continue to watch that. And so make sure you're getting these kinds of insights, because it will help you to start making better data-driven decisions around staffing, routing, policies, or other investments you want to make in other products and technology. So, you're going to make a technology investment in this. It may be significant or less, just depends on, the dynamics of your environment, how many lots you have, things like that. But what we've seen is there definitely is long-term ROI, but don't just take my word for it. I think you want to be able to calculate this yourself, and there's, multiple considerations for how you want to look at this. I mean, you want to have data on your current staffing counts. Some of you guys shared that with us already. 4 to 8 was kind of the 50% of you have that many enforcement officers operating at any given time during the day. So looking at the counts, but also how many hours they're working, how many citations are you currently issuing, and then you can kind of forecast how many more you'll be able to issue when you move towards the directable enforcement kind of approach. And then you can look at, well, what's my current citation revenue recovery? How much am I actually collecting off that? So if I increase the number of citations that I can issue by 50%, 100%, maybe even more, depending on the dynamics of your environment, then what does this mean from a revenue standpoint? Now, I know that most people don't think of citation revenue or enforcement revenue as a good revenue. It's kind of a necessary evil. What you should ultimately see is that, one, there'll be an uptick here, but you'll get an uptick on your compliance and getting better, good revenue that way. And then from a cost standpoint, if you are using LPR, mobile LPR, how many of those do you have as well? So all these things are inputs amongst many other things that you'll want to kind of put into a calculator. There's some out there on the internet, but if you don't have access to one, that's certainly one thing that we can help with. We've got a spreadsheet and we've got a ROI calculator that we can share with you that takes some of these inputs in and takes some of the information about your environment in as well, and kind of shows you what the ROI can look like. So if you do want access to that, just email info@spotgenius.com and we can share that with you as well. One topic we don't talk about enough is the safety of our parking enforcement officers and staff. It is definitely a topic that's getting talked about more, especially at IPMI. But there's countless cases of enforcement officers, getting verbally abused, getting threats made at them, uh, physical assault even, which happens across the United States, across different regions, because vehicle owners are getting into arguments over a citation being issued, and this number is only growing. And because of these kinds of dangers that they're facing, it's becoming even harder and harder to get folks to do this job. So what we've seen is that directable enforcement actually helps in this way too. Some key enablers with directed enforcement, which is driving an improvement here. First is accuracy. Accuracy and proof of data. It's harder, I should say, to have an argument when there's hard proof of, hey, your vehicle came in at this time and it's time stamped, and you only paid for 1 hour of parking, you've been here for 3, or you haven't paid at all. When you have that proof, it certainly helps deflect some of this. Not perfect, but it certainly helps. You're only going to locations where it's needed. You're limiting your exposure out there in the elements where these threats exist, because you're no longer having to patrol. You're just kind of reacting to the violations that are happening. And when there are violations happening, there's little to no data entry. If you use a kind of fully kind of integrated system like we talked about, you're limiting the data entry needed, if at all. There's guidance on where to go, and you're just going there to kind of verify what the system's telling you, make a decision about how, what level of enforcement you want to take, print and go. So it goes from multiple minutes of an exercise to just seconds in a lot of cases. So again, it's about limiting your exposure out there, having that run-in with the vehicle owner, and for these things to even happen. So it can also help in this way as well. So just in summary, this balanced approach of human touch and automation really can, I think, drive a lot of efficiency, increased efficiency across your enforcement staff. It's going to allow you to decrease some of your costs as well, especially if you're implementing heavier kind of OpEx things like mobile LPR and so forth. It's going to ultimately increase your compliance rate when you have a more effective enforcement solution. I mean, this is no secret. You're going to get a higher compliance rate, better revenue if it's a revenue generating kind of thing, but still give you that high touch, discretion based patron experience that we all want as well. I think there's one thing I've learned as well is that there's no one size fits all. There's no single solution that applies to everybody. Everyone's parking culture, everyone's parking kind of policy, how they want this to run is just different. And so having that ability to really customize it and have it be high touch is going to be important with all of this. So with that, I will pull over for questions here, and I'll pull up the questions panel. Let's see what we got queued up here, if I can find the questions panel. Stop sharing here for a second.
But yeah, if you have a question for our presenter, this is a good time to type it in the Q&A, and we will get to as many as time allows. Rachel Wheeler will be picking the questions. So yeah, go ahead and type your questions into the Q&A.
Yep. Saw some chats coming through here as well. Some folks asking about the PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, we'll certainly share that with you as well. So there's a question in the chat from Jonathan here. And it's a specific question to the SpotGenius solution, which is fine. Does your solution allow for parking payments at an individual lot as well as monthly permit management? And the answer is yes. So I think we all know that there's going to be different ways that you allow parkers to park in your different assets, and I think diversity of payments is a big topic on this space right now. Is that you want to meet the driver or the parker where they are in terms of what they're comfortable with, and so our system does kind of bridge the different ways that you manage this. So if it's a monthly permit parker, yeah, we'll look up against that. If they're scanning to pay with a QR code with a mobile device, we can check that. If it's a pay station, we can do that as well. And so yes, we can check across payments and permits also. Happy to show you more later on. So there's a question here about how do you account for misreads coming through the chat. And so just to kind of clarify, I'm assuming what's meant by misreads is license plates that get read incorrectly. And that can happen for a number of reasons. One is the, the angle at which it's coming through at. The camera ultimately is just like your eyes, right? So if you think about any kind of computer vision based system that uses AI, if you compare that to a human, the eyes are the camera and the brain is the AI, right? And so if the optics of the camera is kind of being impacted by things like glare or angle, or maybe it's too dark, maybe there's dirt on the license plate as well that's kind of covering certain things up. And so most smart parking management systems, I'm speaking more broadly than SpotGenius here, do something called n minus read rates, n minus 1, n minus 2, n minus 3 as an example. And what will happen is the customer, you being that person, would decide in that system, how much grace do you want to give in these situations. So let's say there's a license plate that's ABC 123, and when the vehicle pulls in, because of whatever situation, the system reads it as ABCL23 instead of 1, because those look very, very similar, right? And so what happens is most systems can do kind of a fuzzy match against whatever backend they're checking, whether it's the payment system, permit system. It kind of says, okay, first look for a ABCL23. If you don't find that, then kind of have some grace and let one character be off, or let two characters be off, and see if you match or not. And different systems will handle those scenarios where, if you get multiple matches, what should it do, and so forth. But most modern systems, ours included, can deal with a misread of a couple of characters and still match against that. And it's not just about misreads from the license plate. A lot of times it's based on someone fat fingering the entry. So let's talk about like scan to pay. You scan the QR code, or you walk up to a pay station and you input your license plate and you put it in wrong. That happens as well, right? So again, most systems will deal with that in a way where, it can deal with 1 or 2 or 3 characters being off. So another question here from Sergio about how do you handle no reads? Is there a human person looking at the image and inputting the correct plate manually? So, our system does not have any kind of humans behind it. It's purely AI, computer vision AI driven. What we do though is when a vehicle pulls in and we couldn't do a read, we do generate. We are able to detect that, and a human can take an action upon that if you want to. I guess it just depends on how often it's happening and how serious it is for you. So you will get alerted about that, but we don't have a human being deployed in any way to try to heal that missing data by any means. Okay, so some questions coming in here now. Is there any data for how many enforcement officers are needed per parking spaces, industry standards or averages? That's a really good question from Jeff. I don't actually have that data, but I know we have some folks in our team which are very, very well versed on these things, and some of them are associated to IPMI as well. So I'll get this. I'll definitely get this for you, Jeff, and we'll send it out. It's a great question. I don't know it myself. Obviously a lot of that's going to have to do with also what kind of enforcement based approach you're using. And obviously with directable enforcement, you're getting many more spaces per enforcement officer versus a different approach. Another question here is, have you seen these solutions offer integrations of citation forgiveness with the option to pay for theft of service rather than issue the citation? So, okay, I think I understand the question here. So, yes, a lot of the citation platforms that we integrate with kind of give you the ability to pay for the service within a certain amount of time, and then progressively the penalty kind of gets worse, even to the point where some of the systems that we integrate with will allow, you may not like this, but they can look up the owner's information in the DMV databases and actually text them with a link that says, hey, pay it here before this kind of progresses to the next level. And that does head off a lot of them. So yes, there are services that can do payment rather than kind of having it escalate to us like a pretty expensive citation. Rebecca Growth, she's asking N-1, is that kind of a fuzzy logic or is that something else? Yeah, absolutely right. N-1, N-2 is really about fuzzy logic. It's about just dealing with 1, 2, 3 characters being off based on the read or based on what's input into the payment system. So one question here in the chat from Greg, which is how is the refresh rate, or what is the refresh rate for detecting payments? So there really is no, okay, actually, I misunderstood the question at first. So in terms of for initial check, so a vehicle pulls into the lot, we do a real time, and I think most systems work the same way, but I'll just speak about SpotGenius here for a second. We do a real time check against that payment backend. So let's say it's Flowbird, for example, or it's Park Mobile, or it's Ubio, whatever it might be. We're doing a real time check against our API to see, is there a payment found for this vehicle with this license plate using the N-1, N-2 kind of fuzzy logic matching as well. That'll usually happen after a grace period. So most parking lot operators and groups will say, hey, we want to give the user, after they pull in, 5, 10, 15 minutes to pay using whatever means they are making it available before we make that check and then penalize them. So after the grace period passes, we do a real-time check to see if it's not there. Now, let's say they do make a payment and they pay for an hour. And the hour passes by, we actually, at the minute that hour is over, that they paid for, we check again. And we offer the same grace period if you want it. And if they don't pay again, then that becomes a violation. So it's not just about initial entry and exit. It's continual checking based on what they're allowed. And the same goes for if they do a reservation for like N number of hours, or they have a monthly permit that allows them to park, for example. And you see this in universities a lot, where a certain kind of permit allows you to come in during Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or during a certain number of hours in the daytime, but you're not allowed to come at night necessarily. And they do that so they can more smartly use their parking assets in different ways and have different audiences kind of offsetting. So they give you a specific permit around that. Our system knows the boundaries of how long you've paid for or what that permit allows you for, and rechecks. So the refresh rate is instant. That's the short answer to my long-winded response. Jose's asking, do you have the ability to progressively increase the fine amounts based on repeat violators? And yes, the answer is yes. In partnership with an enforcement platform, that definitely can be done. So there's a question here about vehicles with dark shields on tags. So I'm guessing that means like there's different things people are doing nowadays to kind of cover up the license plate with like reflective tape and these different kind of visors and in this case a dark shield. I mean, ultimately the thing I always tell anyone is that it's the AI is no better than your human eye. It might be a little bit better, but if you've got 20/20 vision, that's about what the AI can do. So if you can see it with your own eyes, assuming you have good vision, the AI can. If you can't, it can't. So these are just kind of certain inbuilt limitations. But going back to the previous question that was asked, what do you do, if it's a misread? We do know about those situations where a vehicle came in. So a vehicle capture happened, but no read was happened. So you can react to those situations and just track it in general. I mean, if it's only a couple of vehicles here and there, you may not care about it enough, but having the data is going to allow you to decide what you want to do about it. So a question here from Aaron, as someone relatively new to the industry, can you elaborate on how directable enforcement can be used for scofflaw tracking and repeat offenders? Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately scofflaw is about, just tracking the history and kind of repeat offenders. I guess I'm not really quite sure what the question's asking on how directable enforcement. I mean, so first of all, I think by having a real-time way of checking for this, you're not missing any violations, right? Like we're literally capturing every scenario. Now, your ability to react to that might be limited by how many people you have, how far apart your lot assets are, and things like that. But we have accurate data on how often they are violating, and so just having that information and allowing the enforcement officer to make the right decision based on how hard or soft you want to be, I guess, is the right word I'll use. That would be my answer to that. Great questions so far. Let's see, we've got some more coming through the QA panel here. So Sergio's asking, when you detect a stolen vehicle, assuming you have the hot list file, do you send notifications to the local police authorities in real time? Really good question. So a couple different approaches to this. So when you've got stolen vehicle databases, and there's a number of them out there, you can load those in. And now I would say even beyond stolen vehicles. Let's just say you have a known offender list, a BOLO, kind of situation. You want to be alerted about certain vehicles. You don't want to wait for a violation to happen. You should be alerted about these vehicles coming onto your property. Yes, our system can alert you. We do not send these to the local police at this time. We just send those to you. We do partner with other technology platforms that can do this. The most notable being Flock Safety. We can use Flock Safety cameras for their license plate recognition, and you can kind of double dip on that technology investment for both law enforcement and for parking. And so those would send it to the police department in real time. Otherwise, if it's just a non-Flock camera, then we can alert you on that. And the same goes for the reverse of that. Sometimes you want to be alerted for positive situations, like you're waiting for a VIP to come onto the property and things like that. And you want to have someone, a patron out there to help them have a good experience. You can do that also. Can the plates of potential violators be sent into a mobile LPR unit to scan for the violator only? So I think the question here is, can you use a directable? Can you reuse your mobile LPR vehicles to kind of still to do directable enforcement? And yes, you can. So the cameras, the fixed base cameras that are deployed can capture the violation, trigger it. Whatever system, whether it's Genetec or whatever it is that you're using, we can basically populate the violations into that, and you can use the vehicle to go to the right place, take the action, walk away. So you're not using the vehicle for the patrolling anymore. You're using it more for deploying to the violation that needs some action taken. So absolutely, yes, you can do that. Thanks for the comments there, Carrie. Appreciate that. We've got a few more minutes here, so happy to take any other questions.
Any last questions for our presenter? Okay. Hearing none, Shabir, I'll hand it off to you to give any last words for today. Oh, wait, hold on. We got one at the last minute from Jonathan Wicks in chat.
Actually, two. That's usually how it is, right? People are thinking, and then
Right.
when the door is closing, they want to run into the mall and still buy stuff, right? So I got three. Thanks, guys. We'll keep going here. So have we integrated with any parking guidance systems to direct occupied areas? And yes, we have. So while we do parking guidance as well, if you've got like a red light, green light system, or a digital signage, for example, that kind of talks about or displays zone-based counts in different parts of the lot or the structure, yes, we absolutely do and have integrated with different systems to push occupancy data to that. Another question from Jose here. Do you have any implementations on the East Coast close to DC? We will reach out to you and discuss that. So I don't want to disclose any customer names on the call here or any details like that. But yeah, we absolutely can point you in a direction. So Rachel will take a note of that and reach out to you. So another question here. When you have an institution, when people expect or feel more comfortable seeing an officer out enforcing, how would this system allow if it's more directed enforcement? So, there's still an enforcement officer out there which is doing the last mile job, which is detecting it. And so they will see them out there, but it's just that they're not having to really patrol around, to check each vehicle. It's more of an automated mechanism of checking. But I think what I found, and I think what some of the the PR out there kind of says is like when there's still a human touch, people and drivers are still very happy with that because there's human discretion being used. I mean, I think people sometimes get really irritated as an end user, as a driver, when like, hey, I went 2 minutes over and you're sending me, a $60 violation for, a 10 or 15 or $20 parking, um, you know, uh, payment that I missed. That's like price gouging. That's excessive. So I think when you have a human involved, a human touch, they're able to take some discretion and say, okay, they're just 2 minutes over. I'm gonna snooze this, and that's something they can do. In a lot of systems, our system included, kind of snooze and say, I'm gonna come back in half an hour, give them a little bit of time, and if they're still here, then I'll actually issue the citation. So that human touch, I think, will go a long way in that. So I think it's Rika asked about the reporting and analytic aspect of our service. So ultimately, the enforcement, the compliance checking, and the enforcement is enabled by the granular tracking of the activity in the lot. So we track vehicles both by looking at vehicles coming in and out of the parking structure, the parking lot, or even on street on certain blocks. And then we also do overhead interior lot kind of checking as well. So we know about hot spots and cold spots within your lot or your garage. We know about certain stall types are getting used more than others. We know about circulation, so we know how long it takes from someone to kind of enter the lot, ultimately find a spot. So there's just a lot of granularity of data and analytics that we track because we have that computer vision based tracking. We're not using like a gate arm or a loop or anything like that, right? That can't really identify. We also have information about vehicles. So, I mean, like you can, for example, like one common example I give to people is that if you are, thinking about putting an EV charger into your lot, it's probably valuable for you to know how many EV vehicles come in to your lot in general at any given time, so you can make the right decision about do you need it or not, how many should you have. So that kind of data and analytics, I mean, it's just a small example. It's the tip of the iceberg of what we can do, and all of that's accessible in our platform. So would love to show you more, Rick, if you're interested as well.
So many amazing questions. We got one more for our man. That'll be the last one, I
Yeah.
think. Two last
Um,
ones.
yeah. No current implementations in Canada yet, but many conversations happening there for us. And there's really no concern about us implementing there too. So we've got some good partnerships there, valued resellers and other installer partners. So would be happy to talk to you about it. No concerns about installing in Canada. Jose's asking, can the enforcement software alert the officer that they are issuing a violation for a paid session that expired less than 5 minutes before issuance, similar to the snooze feature you mentioned? Issuing a violation for a paid session that expired less than 5 minutes before the time. Yes, it can. And again, happy to show that.
So thank you again. Such amazing questions from our group today. And you will get our presenters' contact information as well as the archived video on YouTube after by at least tomorrow. So look out for that in your email. Any last words, Shabir, for our crowd today?
No, I think I've used everyone's time down to the last minute here. Thank you, everyone, for attending. A nice large crowd. I think Kenny said this is a new record for the year. So it just shows that this topic is super important to people, and people are looking to innovate, become more efficient, all the things I mentioned. So really excited about that engagement. Looking forward to engaging with all of you more, at some of the shows. But please do reach out if you want to learn more about this topic in general or SpotGenius. Happy to talk more.
Thank you so much, Shabir. And thank you, everybody, for joining. I want to thank Shabir for hosting today's Learning Lab. We thank you for joining us today. Have a great day, everybody.
Take care. Bye.